Hello, I'm Mark Fleming, the Chief Economist at CoreLogic, and welcome to our Summer 2014 Housing Update. One of the biggest questions and concerns in the housing market today is that the student loan debt is too much of a burden and creates home ownership issues for the millennial generation. The question we simply ask is, does student loan debt impede home ownership? In this first slide, you can see the relationship of student loan debt to other sources of debt. In particular, you see the obvious growth rate in student loan debt. It's now over $1 trillion. Compare that to auto and credit card debt, which is less than that and also slightly declining. You see a very, very strong relationship. But the issue here is also that these are forms of debt that are unsecured. If you compare this to mortgages, a secured debt with a housing, it's $13 trillion or $14 trillion, a much bigger asset class. But don't forget that student loan debt is basically investing in your own human capital. So you could think of student loan debt as being secured by future income earnings because you have a better education and can get a better job. And that's where it really comes into our student loan debts causing people to not be able to own homes. We first have to ask the question of, well, what is the home ownership rate for these groups of people, for those who have student loan debt versus those who don't? And in this slide, you can see that the home ownership rate for those who had student loan debt in their mid-20s by the time that they were 30 were more likely to own homes going into the financial crisis. But the financial crisis and the housing recession that we've just experienced in the mid-aughts drove many of those people out of home ownership. In fact, the decline in the home ownership rate was a little bit faster for those who had student loan debt than those who didn't. So we see that probably what happened was people who had student loans, went to college, got educations, often bought homes coming out of college. They were more likely to have been foreclosed upon through this crisis. So maybe buying a home wasn't in the cards for them at this point in time. But now we want to turn to the idea of measuring the relationship between the amount of student loan debt that you have versus the amount of income that you earn. Because if you get a college degree with a student loan debt, and it's important to note, and finish that degree, then you should be earning a higher income. So what is the relative burden of student loan debt today versus in the past? People had less loan balances in the mid-90s, and they also earned less money. And basically the burden was about 10%. Now you look at the chart and say, well, what is the burden today? And it's also about 10%. This comes from a study that was recently released by the Brookings Institute. So the burden of student loan debt on the household budget on a month-to-month basis is about the same today as it was 10 to 20 years ago. And if people could afford to buy homes and figured out how to become first-time home buyers with student loan debt in the 1990s, then the situation is no different today. They have no more of a burden of having a student loan today than they did in the 1990s. The real question I think we have to ask here is not that they can't afford to buy homes and aren't doing it because they have a student loan debt, but they're choosing not to become homeowners. They're also choosing not to get married and not to have children as soon as their parents' generations did. So in many ways, we might think of trying to understand why they don't want to become homeowners or why they're making these lifestyle choices that are so important to oftentimes becoming a homeowner at a later point in their lives. And in fact, studies show that having student loan debt, when you actually do all the econometric analysis, the likelihood of being a homeowner is basically insignificant. So most of the evidence today suggests that the fact that people have student loans is not a significant impediment to becoming a homeowner. They're choosing not to in this age generation. Once again, thanks for tuning in to CoreLogic's Housing Update. For more information, go to the Insights area of CoreLogic.com for our research blog and other housing statistics.